Okay, y'all, let's get started. Okay, so Sefer Yehoshua 2, right? Last week we did our introduction. We spoke about Yehoshua. We spoke about Rahav. We're going to speak more about them tonight. And we're going to speak about one of the key things. And Rachel, I want you to focus on the mahalach of this, on the process, on how we're going to approach this issue. All right? Because I hope it might shed some light on just an approach, a possible approach. Okay, so the book of Yehoshua opens up, Kadosh Baruch Hu going to Moshe Rabbeinu and saying, listen, Moshe, you know, my Ebed, Moshe Rabbeinu is gone. I'm fully vested in you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yehoshua. And he says that wherever you go, V'atakum avodat hayaden hazeh, stand up. Kum, when we use the term kum in Tanakhic parlance, we know it means stand, build your destiny, impact the Jewish people. And generally speaking, when you see the word kum or kam, vayakom, it means you'll be impacting the world as well. Avodat hayaden, cross over the Jordan River. We're going to talk about next week the miracles that were involved when they crossed. And go and inherit the land that I promised to the Jewish people. Everywhere you go, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yehoshua, wherever your feet step, wherever your feet touch the ground, you will inherit it. You will have it. From the north to the south, from the rivers to the sea, and everything in between, everything that you can see, everything you can imagine, it will be yours. No one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yehoshua, no one will stand in your way. Lo yityatzeb ish lefanecha kol yemei chayecha. Nobody will stand in your way your entire life. The same way I was with Moshe Rabbeinu, I'll be with you. I will not hinder your reach, your strength, your hands in any respect whatsoever. Chazek va'ametz, be strong, be emboldened, because you will inherit the land. And he says the only criteria is that you have to keep the Torah. Good. What happens right after that? What does Yehoshua do? He goes to the Jewish people and he says, get ready, because in 3 days we're crossing over the Jordan River and we're in the land ready to realize our destiny in the land of Israel. Good? All set. Everything's set and ready. Does this remind anybody of anything or no? Anybody reminded of anything here? What do you say?
Matan Torah.
Yeah, and keep going. Well, you have the 3 days of Matan Torah, right? What?
Right. Yeah, they prepared for 3 days.
Beautiful. They prepared for 3 days. Same thing here. By the way, that's an important topic. We should talk about that. We'll talk about the 3-day preparation. Maybe we'll touch on it a little later. But what ends up happening now, similar to what happened once before.
Were they not 3 days out from
They were 3 days out. Exactly, Zeke. They were 3 days out.
There was no getting there faster than that, right?
No getting there faster, but that was okay because to Rachel's point, they needed that 3-day prep time like they had in Matan Torah. Same type of prep time. We'll talk about why that is and what that is. What does Yehoshua ben Nun do at this point, David? What does he do?
He sends in the Meraglim.
Right.
So they were getting there faster, though. They were going to be able to get there faster than the 3 days.
Okay, but what's going on here, Zeke?
Well,
What is? One second. HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens up the book.
There's a trust issue.
You will have no problem. It's yours. Just stick with me. Stick with the Torah. It's yours.
There's a trust issue.
One second. Oh, good. So this is what we got to talk about. Yehoshua turns to the Jewish people and says, 3 days. Remember the 3 days, guys? Remember mom and dad when they prepared for 3 days before Matan Torah? We have something equally impactful happening. 3 days, 3 transformative days. And then what does he do? After everything is cooked and ready, so to speak, he turns around and he sends in 2 spies. What happens to the spies? What do?
They come back with different with reports of different things.
Okay, so let's
A
see.
long report, right?
They sneak in, good. They sneak in. And how do they sneak in? They sneak in as men
Visiting a brothel, right?
to go to a brothel. So whose brothel do they go to? They go to the brothel of Rahav in the city of Yericho. We're going to talk about the whole brothel thing in a little while, but the city of Yericho was a key city in that area and pivotal to the rest of the conquest. So they go sort of dressed up, so to speak, as men en route to a brothel. That's what they do.
They're wearing their cool outfits to go to the
They're wearing their cool outfit, right? They're wearing a Saturday Night Fever,
right.
so to speak, and they get to her place. So this way, they're assuming they're going to avoid being noticed. It's not the case. They are noticed. The king finds out about them, reaches out to Rahav, says, "I know you have two Israelites there. Produce them." What does she say? They're gone. Chase them before they get too far away from the city. They run to chase them before dark. Of course, now they think they're outside the city. Now they could be anywhere. What does Rahab do? As you know, she takes them up to the roof. She hides them. We'll talk a little bit more about that. How she hid, what it meant, what were the double meanings to all of those details. And of course, they are not caught. We'll come back to Rahab and her thing in a little bit. Then they come back to Yehoshua bin Nun, right? The spies come back, and what do? Next chapter, Perek Bet, they come back, and what do?
They report that they have giant fruit, giant people, Uri's.
No, that's the other spies. Okay, that's those other guys. What do these men do? Two men. What do?
Oh.
They come back to Yehoshua, and they tell him, "We got this one in the bag." Did they see anything? Did they know anything? How long were they in the country, so to speak? Less than a couple of days. What are they doing? They're conveying Rahav's panic and sense of surrender when she says that everybody knows how strong the God of Israel is. She doesn't say how strong the Jews are, because everybody knew the Jews weren't soldiers. They were slaves, right? And in the desert, they weren't soldiers either. So everybody knows how strong the God of Israel is. And as a result of the God of Israel's strength, how successful the Jewish people are. The people are in a panic, Rahab says, and you will have no problem conquering the land. What do the two spies do? They go back to Yehoshua and they tell him exactly that. And that's where the story ends. Now, what's the last story about Zeke? The previous spy story is what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, we're on our way in 3 weeks or so. We're on our way in. Tells Moshe Rabbeinu to send spies. They don't spend 2 days. They spend several weeks. They come back and they report back to who? They report back to everybody. Everybody hears. And of course, we have the great sin, which we read about in this past week's parasha, and that whole generation is punished. Hey, Sarah, how are you? The whole generation is punished. Now, spy story 2, the story of Yehoshua. He sends the spies in after HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, you will have the land absolutely, unequivocally, nothing to talk about, it's yours. He tells the people, we're going in. Go back 1 generation. Moshe Rabbeinu was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're going to have the land. It's yours. It's what I promised Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's your destiny. The Torah can only really be fully realized in the land of Israel. Now go ahead and send spies, which he does. And it's a mess. Tell me the third case we have with reference to spies. The story of Bereshit. What's the third case with the reference to spies? The brothers. Great. The brothers of whom? Of Yosef of Sadiq are called what? They're called spies, right? When Yosef sees them, when they come down to Egypt, after he's been there for a long time, 20 plus years, in order to get food so they don't starve, he calls them spies, and he threatens to imprison all of them for coming down to spy on Egypt. Now, spy story 2, Yoshua bin Nun, seems pointless. I'm sorry, spy story 3. Spy story 2, Moshe Rabbeinu, pointless, and only ended up with a negative. Spy story 1 with Yosef HaSadiq. So tell me, what is going on here? Why? Why spies? Why all of this? What's the point? What was the benefit? What was the purpose? You guys are on. What do you say?
Hashem urged Moshe to send in the spies in that story.
That's
Right.
right.
So
And
you gotta,
Yeshua-
you can't fault Moshe for that one.
No, we're not looking to fault anybody. What we're trying to understand is, and Yeshua doesn't say by Yeshua who asked that the spies be sent, but to your point, Zeke, Yeshua would never done it without Hakadosh Baruch Hu commanding him to do it.
Right.
So, what is this point? What did we gain? If you want to tell me well, let's take story by story. What possibly did Yoshua bin Nun gain by sending in the spies on the surface? What did he gain?
Recognizance, you got to go in and see what's happening before you go and attack.
But what did they see? He was prepared to go.
They didn't do the right.
Promised
They
victory.
didn't do it properly, but you should be scouting the land and assessing, getting a real assessment. You're going
Okay.
to war.
Okay, one second. Very good. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu's promises get us just so far, and we need our own reconnaissance.
Sure, you have to do. Sure.
Okay, fine. Anybody agree with that? Disagree? We're okay with that? Hakadosh Baruch Hu makes his promise. Every place you step is yours, but we need our own reconnaissance. Yeah?
Well, you have to do. You can't just draw a circle and hope that no arrows hit you. You
Right.
have to, right? We have to do.
Very good. So why didn't Yoshua share it with anybody? Who needed the reconnaissance? Yoshua? Tough to say he needed the reconnaissance.
Right.
He was Misharet Moshe. He was number 2, comes number 1, builds the greatest generation in Jewish history. Did he need the reconnaissance? No.
No.
Did he share it with anyone who might have needed it?
No.
No. So now what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Now, to your point, Zeke, a number of the Mefarshim go with you. A number of the commentaries go with you, and they say, exactly to Zeke's point, that the Jewish people need the practical affirmation. We need the Iron Dome. We feel over here, we feel some sense of confidence that there's this fantastic machine that takes down missiles. So we have a great sense of confidence in that. We're very proud of the IDF. We're proud of the Mossad. We're proud of the Shin Bet. We're proud of whatever we can relate to on a practical level that helps us deal with enemies attacking us.
Right.
So Zeke, to your point, that's what some of the Mefarshim say, that, okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made an absolute an absolute commitment conditioned on the Jewish people staying with the Torah. This particular action of sending the spies really doesn't give us any gauge of whether they stayed with the Torah or not, but it's a form of reconnaissance. It's a way for a human being to have a practical affirmation to his concerns.
And you said
Okay.
that Hashem advised it to Yehoshua, no doubt.
And Hashem advised it. There's one problem. In the case of Yoshua, he shared it with no one. He shared it with no one. No, I was really struggling with this. I said, what is going on here? In the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, it was a total failure. was an absolute failure. So what did we do? We need the story of Yosef to help us a little bit. So talk to me. Talk to me. What is a meragel? What is a spy? What is he?
He's
Come
got
on.
ulterior motives. A spy has hidden motives, right?
He has hidden motives, but what else is a spy? A spy is duplicitous, right?
Right.
A spy is a he's a cover. He's a diversion, right? A spy is not who he professes to be, not who he looks to be, right? These men they didn't have spy on them. But what about if the whole process was a diversion? What about the Yosef Hasadik story, which came before the other two, providing us a portal to understand the other two? That maybe it wasn't at all about spies seeing the land at all. The spies were simply a diversion. They were simply a cover for something else.
Ease us into the land, to distract us, so we just go in and get in there.
No, but now you're back on your same idea. I'm saying it had nothing to do with that because there was no to'elet. There was no benefit from the spies going into the
result has
land.
to be a part of it, is what I'm saying. The result is that we end up in Israel. So the result is that with Yosef's brothers, that we ended up in Egypt. So that's the delivery device.
1 second, beautiful. Let's see. Can we agree at this point that there was no palpable, quantifiable benefit to the incident of the spies? I think you can. In Yehoshua's case, it's black and white. Nobody knew about it.
Right.
Okay. In Moshe Rabbeinu's case, there was no palpable benefit because what came out of it? A disaster.
Yeah.
Right? We had Dora Midbar. We had all these people punished to not leave the desert, and only their children.
But with Yosef and the brothers, it puts them back on their heels, and created an openness to what was to come.
Beautiful. Exactly. That is exactly it. So what about, Rachel, you're in? What about, okay. All right. So step up. I want to hear it.
No,
What about,
I'm waiting.
okay. What about if the whole spy episode, if this whole spy concept is purely a cover, it's a smokescreen, it's a diversion, it's to take us off the key motive. But to Zeke's point, it's transformational. It's absolutely transformational. The whole spy thing on its surface has no value. We're going into the land of Israel. Moshe's time, Yehoshua's time. But look how Yosef HaSadik used it. He used it as a pretense to force his brothers to move back to the people they needed to be. He used it as a guise, right? Spies, they hide things. They misrepresent things, exactly as Yosef HaSadik did it, by design, in order to make his brothers realize who they were, that they were disingenuous people, that they needed to reclaim who their father and grandfather and great-grandfather were.
To defend themselves
More than to defend themselves, to reclaim themselves.
Right.
They were so far off. Huh?
Was it to see how the rest of the world sees them? That's the feeling I get. So Rachav is telling them how the outside world sees them, how they see God, and how.
Hold on to the Rachav point a minute, Joy, because we're going to go back to that in a minute. You're right. There's a second element here that involves Rachav. First element, though, I want to suggest the following. There's a national process for the Jewish people. something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed in general terms way before the world was created. When he looks into the Torah, our rabbis write, and he designs the world, but he designs it based on this journey, this process that the Jewish people must take through time. So the Jewish people, based on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's general plan, start here and end up in a very heightened, beautiful, elevated human place, as close to being beyond human as possible. Within that construct, people and groups make decisions and move in one direction or another. But every so often, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of moves in and creates something in order to bring about a transformation, a change, a move. And when you look at the Meraglim cases, 3 out of 3, the to'elet, the purpose in terms of what the identified purpose was, which was to figure out what was going in the land militarily, was a joke, was valueless. But there was a much bigger thing that had to happen under guise, under disguise, under a diversion that would transform the Jewish people and help move us along this fabulous journey. In the first case, in the case of Yosef, what does he do? He fleshes him out. He forces his brothers to come to terms with what they had become. Who's the primary focus of that? Who's the one who really was majorly off track? Yehuda. Exactly. Yehuda is the primary focus of all of the game that Yosef HaSadik, hey Erwin, Yosef HaSadik plays with his brothers, and he plays very hardball with them. And he uses the concept of a spy, of a meragel, of someone who's duplicitous, of someone who's a fake, in order to force them to confront themselves so that, Zeke, to your point, so that they can step to the next level. It's transformative. The spy story is just a narrative.
But Spy Story 2 is really just about bringing about the understanding or the excuse that these people need to be wiped out.
One second. Let's 1 second. Good. 1 second. Hold.
Okay.
We got it. We got the general possibility here on what we do with spies. Spies are an overlay. Spies are a facade. There's a real something going on. What we see from the story of Yosef HaSadik is that something that's going on is the effort as mandated by God's overarching plan that this specific group of people who are important within that overarching plan transform themselves. And in that case, it was to reclaim who they were. Good. So let's hold that for now. Spy story number 2, we just read it this past week with Moshe Rabbeinu sending out the spies, right? Was there anything to be gained by it? Zero. La Torah ta'aretz. You're going to tour the land and do what? Now, again, go back to what Zeke said earlier, which some of the Mefarshim, the commentaries say, yeah, people need a practical affirmation to God's wishes. Fine. But it was a disaster in the case of Moshe. It was a total disaster. But wait a minute. If we go back to our approach, which is that the spy thing is just a smokescreen, it's just an act, it's just a front. And the point of it is to transform, to beget, to move a person more authentically to who he was and must be again, or to who he must be going forward. In the case of Moshe Rabbeinu with the spies, it fleshed out a failed generation. Hayesh Hashem bekibenu im ayin. We mentioned that last week. That's the call to action when Bnei Israel are described as people who haven't absorbed God within them. He's outside of them.
Why do you need that? Why do you need them to know, okay, we stink, we got to get killed? Why do they have to kill them? Get rid of them. Why do they have to know before they die?
Why we stink? Why not step up? Why not make it?
But we know that wasn't the outcome. That the outcome was we have to give the litmus test. You guys stink, you're out.
Yeah, okay, I guess you
Right.
could use those terms, or you could say, you're right, yeah, they failed and they were out. That's right.
Right.
It was a transformative time. The spies were just, they were an excuse. They were simply an excuse to shine a bright light on the Jewish people to show their failings and to move us to Yehoshua and Caleb, two great men of that next generation, to call them out to the positive and to call out the children of this generation of the desert who would become the greatest generation in Jewish history, the generation of Yehoshua. So the spies are a smokescreen. They're a guise. They're a cover.
They're priming. They prime the pump, right? They're priming it.
They're priming it. Yeah. But they're taking my eye off the ball. Good. Now, third case of spies. Tell me, what's the third case? In this case, here again, no need for the spies. The Jewish people were already promised that they would be in the land. Everywhere they went would be theirs. Yeah?
Yeah.
So no need for the spies. Yehoshua makes it overly obvious that the spy thing doesn't mean much because he never tells anybody that he sent them and he never debriefs them publicly. So if we're going to say in the first case, the spies are a smokescreen in the Yosef HaSadiq case, and in the second case, in the Moshe Rabbeinu case, the spies are a smokescreen. And in either case, it's about transformation and movement. Then tell me what it is in the case of Yehoshua.
Maybe it was just for him.
Huh?
Maybe it was just for him only.
Okay, well, what? Okay.
Maybe
nice.
it's not about the message to the masses. Maybe it's just for him. Maybe
What was
that's-
transformative? Beautiful. What was transformative for him in this? What was transformative for him?
Isn't it to see maybe if the people changed? Because the first time they were looking for the problems, or they got scared and they didn't have enough belief in Hashem, so they saw the bad, or they got afraid. Now they have their belief and their promise, so they know.
So test the people.
They're just doing it as a.
But test the
exercise.
people then. Let's prove your point. Test the people. Test the people so that we can.
Ears. Nobody knew. Nobody knew.
Nobody knows. But let's see what comes out.
Uh-huh.
Two fascinating things.
Is it, but like with your step?
What's that?
I'm saying with your step, was it to bring out with your step was to bring the brothers to a higher point. It's not
Exactly.
that same idea to bring the best down in those people.
Oh, exactly. So let's see who was being brought to what point. So what ends up happening as a result of this experience? What happens? Rahav is discovered. The woman who was a prostitute, some of the rabbis write for 20 years, some of the rabbis write for 40 years, steps up, and we're going to talk about exactly what she says in a few minutes, but she claims her absolute allegiance to the Jewish people, and she saves them. And as we said last week, who does she ultimately marry? She marries Yehoshua. And what comes from her, we'll talk about it more in depth in a few minutes. Some of the Gemarot bring down that 8 great men came from her. And some say that 10 great men came from her. So maybe it's a smokescreen thing again. Maybe the story of the spies had nothing to do with spying the land of Israel and figuring out if we were going to be able to conquer it or not. We knew we were going to be able to conquer it. And we knew it had nothing to do with our power anyway. God was doing the whole thing. But what's the point of the story? It's a guise. It's a smokescreen. It's a diversion to bring Rahav to the Jewish people, to bring about that transformation, that next generation and the generation after that. Now you're talking. So you know what? It goes on all the time in warfare, right? Israel did it, didn't do it, almost did it, definitely did it in this last war, right? When they announced to these terrorists that they were invading Gaza. So many of them went into the tunnels, right? So they could come out of the tunnels and kill young Israeli men and women. And then guess what? They bombed the tunnels. I spoke to someone who's a dear friend who's a high-level intelligence person there, and he said that they did a very, very serious job in those tunnels, a very serious job, much more than will be public. So in warfare, in conquering, there's an element of diversion. There's an element of concealment. There's an element of misdirection. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu does the same thing, so to speak, and he tips us off to it by telling us, I'm calling this the spy story. I'm calling this the diversion story, guys. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it, because there ain't nothing here, right? There's nothing for the spies to be spying on. That's what's so much fun here. That's what's so exciting. But what does it do for us in this case? First thing it does, and we're going to come back to this in a little while, it brings Rachav into the picture, and it demonstrates how spectacular a lady she is. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The second thing it does is pretty fascinating. When Rachav turns to the two men she hid, and she tells them, we'll go back to how she pledges herself to the Jewish people, similar to what Ruth did. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But then she says, V'ata hishav'una li b'Hashem, ki asiti imachem chesed, v'asitem gam atem im bet avi chesed. I want you to promise to God, the same way I did chesed with you, you will deal chesed with my family and save them when you come in and conquer. V'natatem li ot emet. But to me, you will give me a sign of emet. Now, if you tell me that the whole story of these so-called spies who never did any spying, just like the other spies, Moshe's time, didn't do much spying either. These men did zero spying. If you tell me that one of the intentions here was to bring Rachav out and show her greatness, that's enough. But now we have something else that comes into the picture here. We're introduced to the concepts of chesed and emet in the context of war and goyim. Chesed and emet in the context of war and goyim. Now, we learn these concepts together. Many of us learn these concepts together. We didn't learn them in the context of somebody outside the Jewish people, and we certainly didn't learn them in the context of a war situation. So, who remembers what chesed? Erwin, remember this? We went back. We had some fun with this, right? Because you're Mr. Chesed, and we redefined the word. Let's go.
Yeah, but how does you go to war? Chesed. I'm laughing, but when you go to war with chesed, so when you say you don't knock the guy off, I'll let him slide.
What are you talking about? Going to the war with chesed? What are you talking about?
Right.
Hey, so, but he says it, and she repeats it a couple of times. And when the spies, so to speak, commit to her, they say, we commit to the chesed and to the emet. Now, very exciting. Let's remember, what is chesed as opposed to tzedakah? Zeke, come on. Unmute. Chesed as opposed to tzedakah.
The relationship to the subject.
Beautiful. When in chesed, there's no relationship to the subject. Chesed, no relationship to the subject. So, what does Rachav do? She says, listen, guys, I did good for you. Do chesed with my family. Do these men have any obligation to our family? Absolutely not. So what does she do? She reminds us, she's Abraham-like in this respect. She reminds us in glaring terms what chesed is. I saved your lives, guys. So I want you to commit to me to do chesed with my family, because in truth, you don't owe my family anything. There's no direct relationship. So anything you do with them is called chesed. What are we being introduced to in the book of Yehoshua? That chesed applies to a non-Jew, and chesed even applies at the time of war. Because what was God's mandate to the Jewish people regarding these 7 nations that occupied the land of Israel? What was his mandate? Remember?
They have their own set of laws, no?
Yeah, but what was God's mandate? God's mandate was wipe them out, man, woman, and child. Wipe them out. But guess what? Somebody emerges as a heroine. What about her? Do we still go with the mandate of wipe them out, man, woman, and child, despite the fact that someone saved the lives of true Jewish men? The answer is no. Even though God said from way back in the time of Abraham Avinu that when the Jewish people will go into the land, we will wipe everybody else out, all the idol worshipers out. 1 second. But these people, this lady saved them. So what does she do? She says, listen, I know that I have a direct relationship with you. Therefore, for me, it's emet. You owe me. I saved your lives. You have to save my life. It's emet. It's truth. It's fact. It's reality. But between you and my family, it's chesed. And I expect you to show them chesed. And what do they say? They say, we're on. We'll do it. As long as you keep things quiet, which she does, they say we'll do it. So
Is this the Torah's first exception, mulligan situation? Is this the first time we have that?
I think so.
Wow.
It's huge. Oh, it's huge because the whole backdrop is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't compromise on this issue. He makes it very clear that no idol worshiper will survive. Now, some of the rabbis say, well, really, Rahav already forswore her commitment to idol worship. She was already committed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so she wasn't an idol worshiper, so she didn't fall under the edict to wipe out all the idol worshipers. Okay, but what about her brother, her sister, her cousins, her father, her mother? None of them were checked in. None of them were. Some of them say, well, they all made teshuvah before they attacked. They were attacking 3 days later. What are you talking about? So it's clear that they didn't. But what is clear is that all is not fair in love and war. It's not true. When it's a Jewish war, then we're going to be thinking about very human things. And Yehoshua sets that up. And I believe that there were 2 reasons that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yehoshua to send in the spies, neither of which having anything to do with spying the land. The first is Ahav, and the second is to teach us the Jewish approach to war. So when we see the children of the children of the children of these men who are taking great pains in terms of how war is conducted, it's in our genes, it's in our bones. And I'm not looking to talk about the current conflict. Irrespective of that, I'm not looking to talk about it, although it was never more obvious than now. It becomes more obvious each time. But leaving that alone, let's say that never happened, and it should never happen. This is the criteria for Jewish battle. Hesed, i.e., somebody did something good for me, and therefore I will do something good, not for him, but someone he cares about. Amazing, no direct line. And B, the person who did good for me, well, that person, I have an emet with that person. There's a truth. There's a there's something that has to be respected forever. Good thoughts, questions? What do you say, guys? We're okay?
Ricky, Rick, how does has the emet piggybacks the chesed?
The emet is what we called tzedek. When we learned it together, we called emet tzedek, which meant that there's a direct relationship. There's giving on this side, receiving on this side. So now we have a relationship. Once we have that relationship, there's a commitment there to respect that relationship. Regardless of the fact that you're an idol worshiper, you're this lady happened to be a prostitute, regardless of that. Doesn't
Right.
matter. Regardless of the fact that God made an edict that all idol worshippers are out. Yeah. So she's an idol worshiper, and she's talking about, it's amazing. But the Torah is making a point. Who cares? She
Right.
saved 2 Jewish men's lives, and therefore
That's it.
she deserves to be saved.
Did she do it as a transaction? Did she do it as a trade?
Something.
Save me, I'll save you.
Very good. Very good. What if she did?
I don't know. I'm just
What
saying.
if she did?
Okay.
And now, no, the point being that she was never guaranteed reciprocity here.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, that's the whole chesed mission.
She
That's
secured her
right.
own. No, she secured her
Right?
own.
Right,
Right.
Ricky?
Exactly.
It's not, chesed is not a reciprocal
That's
effort.
right. It's not reciprocal, but they recognize it, and they recognize the emet. They recognize the emet.
It's clear she makes a deal, though. She says, you have to save my family. I'll save you.
No. That's not what she says. After she saves them, look at Pasuk Tet, after she saves them, then she asks them.
Uh-huh.
Then she asks them. She doesn't tell them, I'm not taking you up to the roof. I'm not going to tell the king you're here.
Right.
By the way, she risks everything, right? But there's something more here. Who does she sound like? Some of these giants start to sound similar. She sounds like a Ruth, giving up everything, risking everything. By the way, things worked out good for Ruth, but what if they didn't? What if somebody raped her in a field, God forbid, or killed her because she was a miserable, poor ger that had nothing, no protector, no money, no nothing, right? Couldn't have someone taken advantage of her, but nobody did. Over here, she saves them. Now, point being that maybe this, to your point, Zeke, maybe that was her plan all the time. But her plan also could have been to tell the king that they're here and to say, move me to the palace. That could have been planned too. Okay? Rachel, any thoughts? You're okay with it? Okay. So I want you to get comfortable with the following. The main point here is to get comfortable with the following. That if you're reading something in the Chumash or the Navi, and it doesn't make sense on face value, it means you shouldn't be looking at it on face value. And just because the narrative is going on up here, all this stuff behind the narrative is the real story. So people go into a tizzy about the spies at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu and how they spoke Lashon Hara about the land of Israel, and it's true. But is the punishment for Lashon Hara death? Is the punishment for Lashon Hara death of an entire generation? You can't look at the surface narrative and make any sense of the whole narrative because it doesn't work. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is deliberately doing that. He's setting us up in something that doesn't add up. The punishment for Lashon Hara is not death. The punishment for Lashon Hara is certainly not death of an entire generation. And it's not even Lashon Hara about a person. It's Lashon Hara about a country, about a piece of land. So when you read that, don't fall for the surface stuff. Say, wait a second, there's a bigger picture. And the same way, when people speak, we know that their words communicate 10% of their true message. It's the same thing. If it doesn't add up, don't let it add up. Look to the right, look to the left, look before, look after. Find the connections. And don't be afraid to tie the pieces together. Hi, Rebecca, how are you? Don't be afraid to tie the pieces together. Okay? Are we okay with this conceptually? Now, once we approach things that way, and once we now give ourselves the intellectual license to look back to the Miraglim story, the spy story of Yosef, to look back to the spy story of Moshe, and to do anything but trivialize it, then we see that when God uses the term Miraglim, the one he's putting a smoke screen out to is everybody. And what's our job? Our job is to find that myth and to go into the story and to connect the dots. And whenever you see a repeat, I want you to know another thing in terms of learning. Whenever, this is a very important rule in terms of learning. Whenever you see a similar story told over, or the same story told over, it's because there are more details that are being revealed each time. So the way to understand, the best understand the story of Yosef and his brothers is after you've seen the story of Moshe and after you've seen the story of Yehoshua. If the same context is created a second time and a third time, it means that we're pulling, we're yelling at you, listen, man, see it. There's something very important here in terms of the concept of a diversion, of subterfuge, of covering up. Look deeper and find the answers. Okay, so far? Good. What was the answer in this case? Chesed, which means, Erwin, you restated it very well. There is no direct relationship. It applies in the time of war. Wow. Wow. You tell me one nation on earth who holds that way. One nation on earth. We have the Geneva Accords, we have the war crimes tribunals, all that stuff. It means nothing. Nobody pays any attention to it. Nobody cares about it. The quickest victim, the most direct victim is the citizen, is the ordinary person, the non-combatant. That's the first place these crazy people go. Same way the terrorists did to us. So chesed, in a war context, chesed to your enemy, who cares? She saved my life, very good. That's still my enemy. She may have a child one day who will still be my enemy. Sorry, that's not the way it works in Judaism. There is a criteria for chesed. Even more importantly, there's a criteria for emet. I can build a relationship of accountability and responsibility with my enemy when they don't act as my enemy. By the way, there's huge implications to this. And the state of Israel wasn't always so great with this. You know, somebody spies for them in another country. An Arab goes and becomes a spy for the Israeli intelligence. There are too many stories of when they didn't protect him enough and they didn't do enough. You know, when the spy was left to be lost at a certain point. It's wrong. We see from the rules of law that Yehoshua bin Nun is instituting that it's wrong. Now, we're good with that? We okay?
Protect the asset. Protect the asset.
Huh?
Protect the asset.
Protect the asset, right? Don't abandon the asset. That's right. And be comfortable using the terms emet for that asset. You have a relationship of emet and chesed for anybody affiliated with that asset. Good. Let's talk just a few minutes about Rachav. So as we mentioned last week, Rachav is like a Ruth. She's like a Ruth personality in that she spends her whole life in a certain direction. At the age of 50, our rabbis say that at this point, when she meets these spies right before they conquer her city, she's 50 years old. And again, some mention that she was a harlot from the age of 30, and some say she was a harlot from the age of 10, and that she did what she did for the full 40 years that the Jewish people were in the desert. Now, do we really know how many years she was doing what she was doing? Can we know? Of course not. So, Erwin, the rabbis who say that she was acting the way she was acting for the whole time period that the Jews were in the desert, what are they trying to tell us? What are they trying to tell us?
They're probably just trying to I don't know. My guess is they're trying to magnify in her position, because they're not going to say she went 40 years. I mean, they're just looking.
They didn't say she went 32 and a half years. Huh? What's that?
Looking to make it. In other words, they're looking to highlight the fact of maybe, making her look bad or whatever. 40 years. I mean, she couldn't go to distance. Forget
Choose 38 years. Listen, can we really know how many years it was? Choose 38 years and 6 months.
But the number highlight gets someone. Wow, not regarding. I'm saying what she's doing. If anything, if anybody does 40 years, it's wow.
They're hardcore. They're hardcore. 20 years is not hardcore.
I think a year is enough.
But I'm saying that's a whole issue of.
Okay, one second. When the rabbis make a point of saying that she was 10 years old when the Jewish people left Egypt, and she practiced her trade for 40 years.
Yeah.
The same number of years that the Jewish people were in the desert.
Right.
And now she comes to acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's going on? What are they doing?
It's interesting. I'm trying to understand why
they're drawing the comparison. They're drawing the comparison to while you were dilly-dallying in the desert becoming Bnei Israel, this woman was becoming who she became.
Right. Leaving the dilly-dallying out for a minute, while they were becoming Bnei Israel.
Okay.
Right? While they were becoming.
Ricky, that was the word I was looking for.
Dilly-dally, right. While they were becoming, she was becoming.
Right.
But now that you tell me that she was still a pretty low behavior individual for that period of time, what does that mean? What does it mean?
It was a bigger journey than just any person turning around and becoming, right?
Maybe, but what else does it mean? It means it's what, Rachel?
No, I was going to say maybe the fact that that's who the spies met originally and she accepted them or she hid for them, it highlighted that even you would think she's the worst of what was there. If she was good, maybe the other people weren't as bad as they would have thought.
That's right. Could be. It raises serious questions like that. It also raises, it shakes when the rabbis parallel her 40 years to our 40 years. It should shake everybody to say that, you know who's disqualified? Is anybody ever disqualified?
Nobody.
Nobody is ever disqualified.
There's always a shot.
There's always a shot. There's always a process. And when does the process kick in? I'm sure in our own lives, I hear people say from time to time, I'm stuck in my ways. I'm too old for this. I'm this, I'm that. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
We see, Rabbi Akiva, these are the stories that inspire us.
That's right. And they should, because the process is fantastic, regardless of what it was. When she comes out, you know what the word she says? She says spectacular words. I'll read them to you now.
Everybody loves the underdog, Ricky. That's the way it works.
No, she's not an underdog. Oh, no. She is not an underdog. What's that?
A good comeback story.
Ki Hashem Elokechem Hu Elokim Bashamayim Mima'al V'La'aretz Mitachat. God is the God in all of the heavens and all of the earth. I'm sorry. So, and she says, let me see, she has a few more sentences here. Okay. Okay, I'll find it in a second. And she says that the fear that the Anshe Yericho have is because of God's great power, not theirs. Okay. So let's see. Here again, we're confronted with this fascinating thing that the Ger might be more aware of the greatness of God than the Jew. Similar to Ruth, when she says, where you go, I go, where you sleep, I sleep, where you'll be buried, ultimately, I'll be buried. Rahav is saying a similar thing. She's saying that there's no question that your God is the God of the world, of the heavens and of the earth, and I'm dedicating my life to him. Ki nafla emetchem alenu, ki natan Hashem lachem et haaretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you the land, and the fear of you fell on us, because we heard all of what God did in the Yam Suf, and when you left Egypt, and what you did to the Emori and Sihon and Og, and we're afraid, because God is the God of heavens and earth. So, here we are. We have to deal with this concept. And Sari, it goes back to a question that you and I touched on a number of weeks back. We have to deal with the concept of the fact that there are extraordinary souls outside of the Jewish people, that whose entrance to the Jewish people is essential for the Jewish people. So in our dealings with the world, we don't know who that next Ger Tzedek is. We don't know what that person will bring. I met someone today, actually second meeting today, and he said he's half Egyptian and half Italian. And he said, I study the Jewish Bible. I love the Jewish God. He's half Muslim and half Christian. I study the Jewish Bible. I love the Jewish God. He goes, the thing I respect most about the Jewish people is that they're ambitious, they're aggressive, he said it in a positive sense, and they're gentle. And I had honestly never heard it said that way before. And I said, you know what? It's true. We are. We're ambitious, we're forceful, we're leaders, and we're gentle. It's true. So, the story of the Meraglim in this case was to bring us the Hav, to bring us the cases of Chesed and Emet in the context of war. We'll just go another couple more minutes. The Hav ends up marrying Yehoshua. As we said last week, Yehoshua is the Gilgul, is the reincarnation of Yosef HaSadiq. Rahav is the reincarnation of Eshet Potiphar. Yosef, when he does get married, has two boys. She and Yehoshua, Rahav and Yehoshua, have two girls, and from her come her two daughters marry Kohanim, and from her two daughters come 8, and some of the rabbis say 10 of the greatest Nevi'im in Jewish history. People you'll be familiar with. Yirmiyahu, Yehezkel, Malachi. I mean, we're going to be learning these, God willing. These are the greatest of the Jewish prophets. Now, they say that Rachav was Admat Kodesh. She was holy earth. But they say that the only one who could have been her partner was Yehoshua. And we'll wrap up with this. And the only one that could have been Yehoshua's partner was Rahav. So tell me why. Let's go. The only one. She was an idol worshiper for 40 years. She was disloyal for 40 years, right? What's the hallmark of a harlot? She's loyal to no one. She was disloyal for 40 years. She had her trade for 40 years, 20 years, 40 years. The only one she can be with in the context of her adding immeasurably to the Jewish people. And we mentioned last week also, our rabbis say that one of her Gilgulim, her own Gilgulim, other than these spectacular children and grandchildren she has, is that she becomes Hannah, our very special and famous Hannah.
Wow.
So, why did she have to be with him and he have to be with her? What do you say? Yehoshua, as we described last week, is who? He's Misharet Hashem, right? I'm sorry, Misharet Moshe. We called him the servant of Moshe, right? We said in this context, servant is a very good thing. He's the servant of Moshe. When the Jewish people are bowing down to the golden calf and singing and dancing and praising it as this is the God that took us out of Egypt, where is Yehoshua?
With Moshe.
He's halfway up the mountain. Moshe was all the way up the mountain. Yehoshua is halfway up the mountain. When the Torah tells us that Yehoshua is halfway up the mountain, what is it telling us?
He wasn't with them.
It's telling us that he was absolutely not with them, that he had never engaged in idol worship. Who can be the one that can fully build Rahav, who engaged in idol worship for 50 years of her life? The man who never did. He completes her. At the same time, she was loyal to no one, right? A harlot is loyal to no one. It's one person and then the next. How is Yehoshua described? He's described as Misharet Moshe, the servant of Moshe, the absolutely irrefutable, most loyal person of Moshe. His sons aren't described that way, and none of the great sages of the generation are described that way. So loyalty is something that he can manifest. He can speak to it more than anyone. So from Rahab's point of view, there can be nobody better than Yehoshua. But what about from Yehoshua's point of view? Why Rahab?
It's infinite amount of goodness, depth to bring out from her that you can't get with somebody else.
Say that again?
He's a giant. He's a giant.
Right.
And she's got a gaping a need to fill up with goodness that he can fill. That's somebody else who's great their whole lives doesn't need Yehoshua.
So if he's going to give anywhere, it would be to her. But what about the
Fully,
other refinement?
he could give fully to her.
He could give fully to her. But what, and is that the refinement of him that we're talking about here? Is there any other refinement of him?
No, maybe he needs her to ground him.
Beautiful. What? How? Good. And what?
Otherwise, he's going to
In
be
the ways of the world.
he's unfulfilled.
Otherwise, he's what?
He's unfulfilled.
Why?
Because
Why does he need to be grounded?
He doesn't, somebody like him, he needs, I don't know, it's the right cover for the right pot.
I'm saying, if you're serving the greatest man in history, your whole life, your whole
Right.
adult life, right? And you're devoid of the people's failures, how great of a leader can you be? How effective can you be? But if he takes on a Rahav,
Right.
the antithesis of him, the most disloyal, the most distanced from God, with a sincerity to be there, what could complete him more? What other right does he have to be a leader of our
You're not
people?
hinting at a publicity stunt type of thing, though. That's not what you're saying, right?
No, I'm saying he needs Rahav.
Right.
No, he needs to relate to the people. He can't relate to the people without her.
Perfect. He needs to relate to the people. He could never relate to the people without somebody like her, because he was disconnected. He was in the middle of the mountain when they were bowing down. He wasn't down there like Aharon in the junk, getting himself slammed by everybody, being criticized by God, criticized by Moshe Rabbeinu.
She forces him to roll his sleeves up a little bit.
She is his ticket to be the king of Israel. There's no other way. The same way Ruth is Boaz's ticket. She's his future. Rahav is Yeshua's future. And there's simply no way he could have built the greatest Jewish generation if it wasn't for her. Now, if she doesn't convert to Judaism, if she doesn't say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the God of the heavens and earth, she ain't the gal. But she expresses her love of God, and she expresses a highbrow perspective about Chesed and Emet, which she essentially demands of the Jewish people. That's why our rabbis call her Admat Kodesh. She was sacred land. That's why our rabbis say she was already on the Kabbalistic level of Malchut, which is a level of interconnectedness, a very high level of interconnectedness within people. She already had it, according to our rabbis. And when she asked for Emet, she wants to be enabled to grow to the level of Tiferet, which
The
is
women of that generation, the eligible bachelorettes, who are shallow enough not to see the beauty of this relationship between Yehoshua and Rahab. Is there any resentment where people are talking her, he's going with her? Is that the sentiment out there? Is there a not, or it's just that makes sense?
I haven't seen anything like that about Rahab. I haven't seen it.
Right.
Not that it's not something that we see a lot, but I haven't seen it. No.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to just take a step back and just think about the incredible hand of God in bringing certain events to happen, bringing certain people together, and of course the courage of each of these people. So it takes God's hand, it takes a diversion or a cover, and then it takes extraordinary courage. Extraordinary courage. How dare the greatest man in the generation marry Rahab?
Right.
How dare he? Come on, to your point, Zeke. How did they not run him out of town? How did Boaz do it?
Right. It must have made absolute sense.
You know something? It made absolute sense on a level that when you're operating with this kind of perspective, this kind of worldview, this kind of openness, this kind of personal courage, you know, we know that Tob, or Ploni Almoni, as he ends up being called, walked away from Ruth, even though he was a closer relative. He gave up his opportunity for greatness. So we need to appreciate process. We need to be able to look at a lady who was either in the wrong direction for 20 years, extremely in the wrong direction, or 40, and say, wait a second. The minute she turns and makes a commitment, the last 40 years are only considered a great prep. Nothing other than that.
Wow.
They're considered a great prep. Kesheleg Yalbino. A person's past is whitened with purity. And those things are considered enablers and facilitators to the good the person became. Anything that was a negative becomes a positive. She was bad for 40 years, paralleling her to the Jewish people. Wow. So it's a remarkable position, I believe, for the Torah to take, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take. I think it's important as we go forward, whenever you see a story that doesn't add up, it's not supposed to. It was written that way to bring us in, to force us to look in and to the right and to the left, before and after. And again, whenever you see similar cases, regardless of where you see them, connect them. Connect the Ruth and Boaz to Rahab and Yehoshua. Connect the story of the spies in Yosef with Moshe with this. Connect them. That's where you see the fabulous messages emerge. Good. Any other questions?
Nice.
Good.
Yep.
All right. Good. Joy, Rachel,
Thank you.
questions?
Thank you. That reminds me of like the people like during the Holocaust that helped people like hid them basically,
Yeah.
during the time of danger and on her, while risking herself. I feel like for that reason alone, she could have been,
Yeah, that's right. So she
I
does
guess
that.
that was
and
it.
then-
Yeah,
and then
right.
she joins.
It reminds me of that. Right. That sense. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. Very
Thank you.
insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Rick. Have a
Thank
great
you.
weekend. everybody.
Thank you, Ricky.
All right, take care.